back to another episode of Uncovering Possibilities, sponsored by Texas Career Engagement. I am joined by my colleague, Ogechi Ukazu.
Hey there.
And you and I have never actually had an on-air conversation.
Which is because we have all the off-air, like all of them. But here we are together on air, which is really cool.
So this has been such a fun project to work on.
Oh, man. Yeah, absolutely. We've talked to people from a variety of different industries, professions, backgrounds, experience levels. But I think they all have a kind of a common theme that runs through them.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think the first theme that at least I feel like I pulled out of quite a few of these interviews is this idea of just a true commitment to mastery and excellence regarding the content.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Everyone we talk to exemplifies it. I'm going to talk about my sister. I'm not biased, but I clearly am very biased. But, you know, I live with my sister. We were roommates for the past 2 years, and talking with her about just her commitment to understanding the details of storytelling, of course, like drawing and color and just creating narratives and creating world building. There is a acute attention to craft and the details surrounding that, which is just like it makes for undeniably compelling and good.
And I feel like with any of these folks, if they were here joining us now, they would say that the cultivation of that skill and craft is something that's happened over the full tenure of their career.
And it's still happening. They will all readily admit, I would say all of them are at the top of what they do, but they'll all readily admit that there's more that they can do. There's more that they learn. They're always trying to make it better, right?
Definitely. Going through the editing process of just filming this podcast and spending time with the software and spending time with the cameras and understanding the lighting and color correction and all that. I mean, it's interesting we're sort of holding these things in tension because on the one hand, we know things can always be better. I mean, I'm watching videos on YouTube all the time and I'm trying to understand how they're making the cuts and how they're matching the color and all that. But if I took one video and I tried to get to that level, we would have never had 13 different episodes.
That's true.
I think all of these artists would agree that you have to sort of accept where you're at in the time, but still we're always trying to continually learn, grow, and reflect.
Right.
And perhaps the next person I mentioned would be our professor, Professor Jared Junkin. I mean, 30 years with the Dallas Winds.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure that he would say, and I think he admitted it on the interview too. I mean, he has handled situations and challenges better and differently than I think he would have done in his previous tenure.
That's very true. And, you know, it's so cool. We've had a front row seat to getting to see him work with the Wind Ensemble, of course, with the Dallas Winds, us as grad students. And you can always see he cares very much about the people in front of him and what he's doing, but he's always looking to get better. He's like a live and in-person example of a commitment to craft and bettering yourself through that commitment to craft.
Maybe the next person that's worthy of mentioning is, to me, sort of the person that most exemplifies, I mean, I don't have a better way of saying it, but being really busy with their work and still trying to reflect that same commitment, and that would be Dr. Kelly. I keep thinking about the analogy that he used where he talks about those two rocks. And he says, this rock is Wind Symphony, this rock is New Music Ensemble.
Right.
And essentially every other amount of space that happens to be in that vessel is filled by his administrative responsibilities. Right. So I've thought about myself this past summer since listening to him talk about that and just figuring out how do we balance all of these administrative responsibilities that we have. But it's easy for those to, at least in my experience, sort of usurp the needs that we have to continue to grow as musicians and artists, because answering those emails is not the same thing as getting the programming done or getting the scores studied.
Or even standing in front of your students.
100%. So maybe you want to speak to that.
Spoiler alert, I got a job as the director of bands at the University of Wyoming. So I'm going to be kind of, you know, entering that world of like real big girl job and, you know, getting all that done. And so I'll actually have more to say about this in the future while I'm like in the throes of it and, you know, deeply involved with it. But you know, having the models of, you know, Professor Junkin and Dr. Kelly, I think the thing about both of them is that, and this is a theme I think that runs through all the people we talk to, that there's an authenticity to them and just like they are themselves in all these different avenues, because it's just so much easier to do that and be that
for sure
than it is to kind of like adopt these different personas for everything. And you talked about this with Jerry. He is who he is in front of 12 and 13-year-olds as a middle school and to the Dallas Winds and everything in between. And so I think that's a part of, you know, that's a part of at least how I'll approach my job, is trying to be me while also being committed to getting better at what I do on the podium as an administrator. I think that's a craft too, being able to communicate with my colleagues, being able to communicate with my students and of course the higher ups. It's a lot of things to balance, but I think being true to myself and authentic to myself is going to be at the center of that. Hopefully, I'll let you know how that works. We'll to be determined.
Well, and maybe talking about that authenticity piece too, because something that feels particularly relevant was when you spoke with Mike.
Yes.
You guys spoke a lot about authenticity and identity.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Oh man, if anybody who's watching this has already seen that interview or had any experience with Bro is Mike on on social media, if you were to see Mike in and out of rehearsal, he is who he is. He's just a funny, charming, intelligent, musical, artistic person. And he just carries that through his lifting. He's a huge, workout, lifting power lifter person, but he's also just this beast on the podium as well. Being able to just be himself. And this is something that Jerry will say. This is something that Dr. Kelly, I think anyone on this list, again, is just they are the embodiment of themselves. They are them. They are not trying to be anyone else. Bro, it's Mike. Mike Labrius exemplifies that.
So maybe the next thread to talk about would be this idea of determination and attention to detail.
Which, again, everybody shares.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think in particular, we saw this with a few folks that we interviewed. So the first thing that I really feel like I took away from interviewing Viet Quang was this clear determination and attention to detail. I mean, I remember connecting with him over Zoom a few months ago, and he was talking to me about spending time with the Atlanta Symphony and talking about this was the specific paper that they use.
Wow.
And this is the specific weight and color to make sure that it's incredibly readable for the musicians.
Right.
And we've interacted with his music.
Right.
And he has an incredible attention to detail. I mean, take a look at his website.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful, very aesthetically pleasing, easy to navigate space. There's plenty of resources that you can find.
Right.
But more importantly, if you just interact with the music itself, it's very carefully considered, and he just holds himself to such a high standard that what you get to solely focus on is the music making. You're not fighting through a bunch of mistakes and errata to make sure that it's going as well as it can. As long as you do essentially what he writes, I hate to be so prescriptive about it, but you're going to unlock a particularly artistic performance.
Which is also cool. Can I add to that a little bit? Because I think that also kind of defines his style too. Which is, I think that's something, that's a really good thing to pull out of that. He adheres to a specific sort of aesthetic and a specific style that's pleasing firstly to him, but because of that, we're able to, if I listen to something, I'm able to recognize that that's a Viet Quang piece almost immediately because of that just adherence to that attention to detail. So I think that's something that we could all sort of maybe learn from. Things that we focus on and pay attention to can definitely define our own styles.
Bring that same conversation into determination, commitment, to excellence to everything that you do.
Right.
I feel like the person that probably best exemplifies that, if I just had to choose one, would be interviewing Matthew Rao. I mean, we actually I remember taking time during that interview during TMEA, and he's talking about living the incredibly busy portfolio career that he has. We had the privilege to catch up a few weeks ago and get a bite to eat. And he was going from just teaching a leadership camp over at Westwood High School. Then he was going to go to the ASTA string convention. And he's continually writing and giving back to the profession and figuring out how to best serve students and teachers. And he's had to, and he says this in the interview, he's had to figure out how to balance his time and how he structures his relationship with his wife and other personal interests and hobbies. And I think if he was here, he would say that would be hard for him to do, but there's no doubt that he is an incredible resource to everybody that he comes across. And I think that attention to detail and keeping all of that in balance and intention with itself is a great service.
Yes, and that does require determination, which I think we can cite our own, formerly owned Mary Ellen Pohl with that, who is probably one of the more determined people I've ever met in my life. It's like if there's something that she wants to get done, kind of dovetails off of Matthew in that he's designed his life to do those things. Dr. Pohl designs how she approaches the staff that she works with, the students that she encounters, the administrators that she has to engage with within her job scope to get the things she wants to get done. And she does it in such an artful and beautiful way that's like you can't help but love her while doing the things that you were like, oh, I wasn't even aware that this is what we're, heading towards. But that's another one I think that exemplifies determination while also all the details of life and getting that in order to help feed and guide the vision. Yeah.
And in that interview with Dr. Poole, something that she talked about was the challenges that she faces working in higher education. She was talking about the enrollment cliff. She was talking about political strife that we're facing right now. And
AI?
I think that AI piece also feeds into the interview that I did with Dr. Turner, Cynthia Johnson Turner. If I had to choose one mentor in my life, I mean, I met her when I was 17 years old, and I still consider to be her a very big presence in my life. And she has continually reflected and changed who she is as an artist teacher throughout just over the 13 years that we've worked together in some sort of personal and professional context. I mean, she also talked about sort of the role that AI is playing over at Laurier, and she's really pivoted. I mean, she was a pretty dictatorial conductor teacher when she was teaching high school, and she has really shifted, and this is true from the time that she was teaching at Cornell, she's really tried to make an intentional shift to, dare I say, democratize the rehearsal environment.
That is so cool. So this kind of speaks to the flexibility, again, that all of our, because you can't be rigid, especially in an art space. I mean, it's very difficult to be rigid and successful and achieve the things you want to achieve. My first introduction into Dr. Turner was when she was experimenting with the whole Google Glass thing. I was like, that's weird and different, but I thought it was really, really cool. And that reminded me of our very own Jamel Hooper here at UT, working with the design and creative technologies here. He's the industry relations manager and all that, and how he needs to be just aware of just the ever-changing, the superbly dynamic industry that is technology and tech, so he can be on it and he can be successful and serve his students in a very efficient way or profound way.
I agree with you. He has to keep his finger on the pulse, just like we all do as 21st century artists. I mean, we're working in spaces that are ever changing, and if we're just stodgy artists that don't leave the academy, we're doomed to fail.
Absolutely.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Something that really stuck with me from interviewing Jamel was this flexibility, not only in his work connecting folks in industry to current students here at UT, but also he spent a lot of time talking about his career trajectory, which was circuitous, to say the least.
Right.
I mean, he worked in a variety of different roles and positions. I think what made him the most comfortable in this role here at UT was this idea of helping students and connecting them with what they want to be doing.
Right.
And what a great service that he's able to do. And I think that is, truly a modern day job for somebody that's interested in building those relationships.
Absolutely.
So I think another person that would be worthy of probably bringing up now that really embodies this flexibility trait is, once again, Bro It's Mike in his social media.
It's really cool that we get to, be in these kind of group chats with Bro It's Mike, with Mike, where he'll be like, hey, this video is doing numbers, or this is really doing really well. Like, we have the UT Bands account, we have the Longboard Band account, we have and his own personal social media accounts. Seeing where those accounts were at the beginning of this year, the calendar year 2023, versus where they are now, and how he's been able to kind of move the times and anticipate what the type of content that's needed to grow our reach and grow our engagement with other people. It's been really, really cool. Like, he's kind of open to, the type of content we release from these accounts, and also the type of engagement that he's, soliciting and eliciting from people who happen on our videos or posts or whatever. So it's been really cool seeing that. And as a result, I think we have probably one of the biggest reach, right, in what we're doing. And it's not just because we're UT and it's the biggest school. It's because we have somebody who's very intentional about the feedback and what they're looking at and how and when they post and what they post and how they post. It's been pretty cool, just kind of picking Mike's brain in that regard.
If any of us were to go back and watch earlier UT Bands posts or watch earlier of Mike's posts, I think that, we could all recognize the amount of craft and attention to detail, but he didn't let that stop him at the beginning. It's something that he did the best that he could do. He created something, he posted it and shared it, and then he went back and did it again. And I think we probably all have to approach works this way. Otherwise, we'll never have anything to share.
Right, exactly. We're just waiting to do that perfect thing, and it'll never happen.
Yes. So now maybe we can move into sort of a relevant thread, which is, I don't know, this silly term of like impatient patience.
Yes.
I think that we struggle with trying to create the perfect artistic product.
Yes.
And no matter if we're working with students or we're working with community members or even if we're working with professionals, and we've had the privilege to do so, things are never 100%. It's not going to be reference recording. It's not going to be hanging in the Guggenheim potentially.
Right.
I think some folks from our community music series really did a great job of embodying that. So you got to interview David Hummel. Why don't you talk a little bit about ABC?
And I had a wonderful time working with him this past year and a half. That group is still kind of in its infancy as far as being an organization, but it's because of the leadership of David and this term, the impatient patience.
The impatient patience.
Yes, where it's like there's a push, there's a drive, there's a hunger to move this forward, but there's also the keeping in mind of the long game. Because there's no way that's going to happen without that vision of the long game. And that's where the patience comes in. But the impatience is, we know what we have right now, so let's try to max out and try to reach the potential of where we are at any given stage, right? And so I think that's what's going on with ABC, which is why they've been able to just grow kind of really organically as they have been over the past couple of months and year. My time as a conductor with ABC has been fabulous. I hope I get the chance to conduct them again in the foreseeable future. They've already moved, like we've talked about. They've moved to paying their players, which is not even, we didn't even dream of that our first season. And hopefully we'll be able to, pay more per service. That's a big component because we're able to attract better, attract talent there and get just more buy-in. And also just our outreach in the community. Like, we know what we have as far as the player students, and they want to come and check out their teachers play, and it's a really nice community that they've built there. And I think we're taking advantage of all those resources or I say we, like I'm still with them. I'm still with them in spirit, but ABC is taking advantage of all those resources to grow as much as they can. So it's been, it's really cool, and I think it has everything to do with that drive, but also an understanding of the long game.
And I think that Tyler Austin and Marilyn Chamberlain, the other part of our music series, embodies those same qualities. I mean, I remember him saying that everybody told him to essentially wait a year to just plan for a year and then go ahead and release a product. And he didn't do that.
There you go.
And I think that really says something to the fact that he was impatient, but with more experience, they've been able to adapt and change and grow. He's been able to better figure out how to connect with the Maryland community in which they perform. And I think that they've been able to take on new projects. They've got recording things. They're doing a conducting workshop in the future. And, if he waited a year, or he could have decided he was too busy to do that.
Yeah.
So it's funny. I feel like we all are continually keeping those rocks in place, to use that Dr. Kelly quote. And yet we're trying to figure out, how do we also grow and encourage our other artistic projects to flourish?
Well, then there's JD Burnett, our very own JD Burnett. And, he's doing a wonderful job with the concert chorale here at UT. But also his, side gig as a professional conductor, because you did this interview. Do you want to talk more about how this principle or this value kind of shows up in his work?
I mean, I think that he shared a lot of really similar traits and qualities and attributes and experiences that we saw from Professor Junkin and the Dallas Winds. I think that he also has continually learned. I don't want to say learn from his mistakes, but I think he would say that. And I think that experience is the best teacher.
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember him saying in ensemble, we should not be sitting idly by and being, I forgot the term, he had a really artful way of saying it. But
Right.
It's actually like a sponge that's what we want to be, is the sponge.
Right.
We want to make sure that we're always taking in and watching the conductor, watching the leader or the teacher, whatever context that we're learning in, and not only trying to receive the content from them, but also go a step further and think, why did they make the choice to say that?
Have an opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And potentially engage with the conductor, teacher after the context. And that's actually the next thing that I wanted to talk about, is this idea of building relationships.
Yes. Everybody gets an A+. All are playing. Yes.
Well, and we've also, in creating this content series, have forged our own relationships.
Yes.
I mean, I really do feel like, shout out to Colleen Gleason.
Colleen!
Yes.
Holding it down.
She's been really great for supporting us and encouraging us, and different folks that have just reached out to say thank you for creating the content series.
You've got some great comments on YouTube, and
we have.
It's been really, really sweet and kind.
For sure. And I would just encourage everybody to not be so hesitant to make that content.
Absolutely.
When I was at TBA, Texas Bandmasters Association, this band came all the way from Bangkok, Thailand, and they played a concert, and it was fantastic. And they gave a clinic the next day. So I go to the clinic. After the clinic presentation, there were very few people that really went up and said anything to the musicians or said anything to the conductor. I think some folks were probably maybe a little bit intimidated by that. And I think potentially maybe some other folks thought there could potentially be a language barrier. But there were a few folks that went up and just said, thank you so much for being here. We're super grateful that you're here to perform. And I would just encourage whoever is listening to try to forge and sustain those relationships. Even if you feel like, I mean, maybe you'll write to somebody and say, hey, I really would love to interview you for a podcast.
Right.
Or I'd love to get a cup of coffee or something to drink and just chat with you. Maybe they'll ignore you or maybe they'll say that they're too busy. But I think that all of us just need to try to build and sustain those relationships.
And what a great, I think that's like a good point to sort of end this on. And just building relationships. That is the thing that holds us all together. Speaking of relationships, it's been great. It's been great doing this with you. I mean, honestly, this would not have gotten done without this man. So it's been great to see you work, to see how your mind works, to see your vision, and the fact that we made it through this semester, even to this, is pretty amazing, and that's a huge testament to you. So thank you.
Well, I've had a blast working with you as well, and I've loved working on the videos, and I think that your questions and dialogue that you've had with our guests has been incredibly organic, and I think just engaging, and has, for me, led to more questions about things like this. How do we draw more parallels between the artists that we spoke with? Thanks so much for being a great friend in this.
Thanks for being a good friend, great friend, colleague, and just hopefully, I mean, who knows? Who knows? This might be a season 2.
For sure. That would be really quite fun.
TCE, let's take a little bit more funding. TCE, we got to think TCE.
Exactly. Yes. So this was funded by a Reimagining professional development grant. Out of curiosity's sake, I spent a little bit of time checking out what it looks like for this upcoming year, the 2023-2024 school year. So I think if you're interested in creating something like this, check out the website. And we've had really great success working with those folks. Specifically, Colleen Gleason's been our main contact.
Thanks to Colleen for her help and support. She's been just the wind in our sails.
We'd love to hear from you. So
yes,
if you've tuned in, a few folks have stopped me in the hallway or sent me an Instagram DM or something just to connect and ask questions. And if you're interested in doing something like this, I mean, truthfully, Ogechi and I have never done anything like this before. So we've probably made every mistake that we could make. Hopefully we saved
10
a
times
few
over.
steps.
Yes, yes, exactly.
If you're interested in doing something like this, we would be happy to help you, and we would just love to connect.
Yeah.
So until next time, thanks for being a great audience, and definitely reach out if you've got any questions.
Bye. And hook 'em.